Welcome to Realms Unknown, a sci-fi and fantasy podcast brought to you by the Bugle. Being an acolyte of justice isn't all glamorous court dates and free fertilizer. It's about the top 5% of the job, moving monologues to sympathetic juries, waving green-vined advocates' hands to illustrate the finer points of the forest law. 90% of the rest is vellum work, wrist deep in skin scrolls, the leather smell of the library. And if you're junior enough and still able to lift your roots, actual legwork. And if you're very unlucky, you get to do what I'm doing now, the 5% of the shit job that is getting hauled into an actual investigation. Which is what led me here, standing in the square at Moss Grove Junction, trying to dodge traffic, human, half-human and Viridian alike, while I tried to figure out who'd put poison in the sprinkler system at Mama Rose's late-night gin and chicken shit joint. Someone jostled my shoulder hard enough to strip some leaves, and I turned, annoyed, to face Realms Unknown! Welcome to Realms Unknown! That's right, you've just entered Realms Unknown, a weekly speculative fiction podcast brought to you by the Bugle, in which we turn the grow lamp of knowledge onto discussions about tropes, news, our favourite old shows, books, games, and more in sci-fi and fantasy. I am your host, published author and comedian Alice Fraser, and my companion on this journey, the Odin to my Yggdrasil, the Elrond to my Rivendell, the Rocket Raccoon to my Baby Groot, the Link to my Deku Tree. It's James Colley. Welcome.
Hello, it's so nice to be here at Mama Rose's late night gin and chicken shit joint. You gotta try the chicken shit.
Well, it's like, what do plant people drink, right? What's rod gut for plant people?
It does sound like a place that, I'm a sucker for a detective story in any genre. And the second, a space person starts investigating a crime and they go to the space diner, I'm looking at you, Attack of the Clones. I am right in there. I'm like, yes, of course they also have diners in this place.
A reminder to subscribe to the Bugle channel if this is something that you enjoy, and all of the books that are covered here are in our affiliate store. The link will be in the show notes. Which brings us to our news section, news in the real world that crosses over into news of the sci-fi and fantasy world. I'm not sure if this counts as sci-fi or fantasy news, but I feel like it does. 4chan was taken down. Unfortunately, this is one of those milk take duck stories because it was taken down by hackers from an even more racist message board called Soy Jack Party. For no, sort of useful or good reason, just to sort of prove their racist supremacy over the other nasty people.
There's always a bigger fish, isn't there, Alice?
There's always a bigger fish, and then it eats the smaller fish. In other more exciting and pleasant news, Joe Abercrombie, who is one of the leading lights of very funny grimdark, he apparently wrote for the new season of Love, Death, and Robots. So I anticipate a heartwarming story about an AI coming into its own, followed by something really horrendous. Someone having all their teeth pulled out. I mean, this is the most exciting news, actually, that I think has happened in a very long time. It may be the most exciting news of science anywhere. There are suggestions that the planet K218b may be harboring something that smells a lot like life. James Colley, you're our science of science fiction correspondent. Can you unpack this story for us?
Yeah, what a sad state of the podcast that a credit level physicist as the science correspondent. But okay, this is really fun. Blink 180K2 is a planet that is about 140 light years away, which is great and terrible news in that if we wanted to go get a look at this, it's going to take a while, and to get any signal kind of back is going to be a problem. It does mean, though, well, let's think about this. 140 years. What, we've only got about, 50, 60 years before this planet gets the signals of the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, maybe Elvis dance moves. We can get some propaganda out there early to them. But anyway, before we get to there is just signs in the atmosphere that up until this point have only ever been associated with biological life. It's a sign that, a particular chemical in the atmosphere that is usually burped or farted out, is a signal that there's biological life on the planet, not in the, and this is the part where you get into the every scientific announcement is actually disappointing the further you go into it. we're not saying there's a space cow. It's way, way, way too soon to say there's a space cow. If there was a space cow, it's probably not a cow in the way that you would imagine it. It's going to be algae. It's always algae. But maybe it's really cool algae that smells nice or something. Who knows? We're never going to get to see it in our lifetime. Don't worry about it. But it's fantastic news.
And there's a dire wolf news or non-dire wolf news, which is the news that dire wolves were allegedly de-extincted by a company, and people are really pissed that they're not actually the extinct animal. James, did you follow this story?
Yeah, so like the what they're mad at is that it's not 100% real wolf, or for that point 1% real dire wolf. They are made genetically modified to be like the wolf. It's not Jurassic Park, people. We don't have the bugs in amber mosquito that bit the thing and we got to keep that, which is a really great trope, by the way. Really good work on that. The part of this that I feel really annoyed the internet was when George R.R. Martin got to hold it, and collectively, as whenever he appears in the press now, everyone was like, "Don't you have a typewriter to sit behind, mofo? Like, can you get back to work, please?"
I mean, he has said that finishing this last book is like the worst thing that's ever happened to him.
And it's you got to think that like his first draft looked exactly like the Game of Thrones ending, and everyone hated it, and he was like, "Oh, well, that wasn't mine at all. I had a much better one. I just left it in my car. May I go and grab it?"
Well, the point is that the direwolves in Game of Thrones were based on direwolves, which were a real kind of very big wolf that
Mm,
existed. And so what they've done is they've crossbred some genetic material from the fossils that they have of these very big wolves with very big dogs and real wolves
mm.
to make a very big dog, essentially. But, you know, it's not a direwolf. It can fuck a chihuahua and make a baby.
Yeah.
It's not it's just a dog.
I mean, who of us can't? But I just think we have much more interesting megafauna to aim at back here. Like if
Giant
you
wombats,
giant
please.
wombat. If you are listening here and you do not know what wombats used to look like, or just how big koalas were, like I know like
Yes, please.
90% of wildlife facts you hear from Australians are lies made to upset you, but these are real ones. Look up what all the Australian megafauna were like, and you're like, oh my God, this is a terrible place to live. Why did anyone choose to go here?
I mean, Australia is quite well known for having small towns with very big objects, like a big banana or a big pineapple.
I've heard of them.
Little do they know that those are tributes to the megafauna should they ever return. They're gonna try and lure it to the big banana.
You will feed on this pineapple for the rest of your days.
Your ad section now, because you can't be what you can't buy. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Vithrax Symbio Enhancement. Why wear clunky metal armor when you can grow your armor? Our symbiotic bark skin hardens on impact and regenerates overnight. Tired of your weak human flesh? Upgrade with Vithrax Neural Vines. Enhanced strength, photosynthesis, and no more coffee breaks. Lose a limb? Let it grow back. Our bioengineered vine prosthetics adapt to your movements and even flower on special occasions. Do not water excessively. Excessive use of symbiotic plant enhancements may lead to loss of perspective, root growth, or losing your selfhood to the mycelium hive mind. Are you trying to grow a sidekick from an avocado pip? Start with 4 toothpicks, 6 drops of human blood, and half a glass of water. Are you tired of not knowing when Ragnarok is going to drop? Try hanging off the world tree for 9 days and 9 nights after stabbing yourself with your own spear. Die and come back to life like the eye-gouging proto-Jesus myth that you are. And don't forget to have your ravens bring you half a glass of water. And this brings us to, what have you been reading? What have you been watching? What have you been playing? What have you been sticking in your brain hole? Tell me, James.
My brain hole's been feeling pretty empty lately, but I'm a novice to this area in this genre. So you have to tell me if I am talking about the same person mentioned earlier, or if I am running headfirst into a very interesting coincidence. But I've been reading Joe Abercrombie's The Blade Itself from
That's
the
the
first
man.
Law trilogy. That's the man? Okay.
Yeah.
I find this fun. This is a real a book that is in an area that I don't read too much of. I have to be honest. I have done few of your classics over the years. I will poke at something every so often, but it's just never particularly been my world. But I went off the back of a few good recommendations and I dove into this world and I'm enjoying it. I find it quite fun. I feel like there are certain elements of the silliness that I believe is a recurring issue in these worlds, and there may be some parts where, oh, it feels like the misogyny is a bit indulgent to get the point across that the character's a bad person when we kind of get that very, very early on. But be that as it may, I think that it's a rollicking read is what I'd say. It's like a really enjoyable, like I never have a bad time when I'm going into it.
Yeah, it is fun. I've recently read a grimdark in which the guy is really horrendous, but actually respects women quite a lot. I'd have to look that one up. I'll try and get it for you guys to give it as a recommendation because quite often misogyny is just shorthand for bad dude, which is good. Says good things about the culture, but it can be a touch lazy. That said, Joe Abercrombie, yes, very fun, very
Mm.
upbeat, manages to counterbalance the truly horrendous scenes of grimdark murder and mayhem with a really light touch.
Yeah, and quite silly and fun and yeah, and I like you're saying, it's like you have to it's that line of like, I want to allow someone to do this. It's just what is the reading experience like? Like in a very disconnected world, it's been a real trend in kind of pop literature or like really like the millennial novel in the last few years has been a lot about an awful person takes three-quarters of a book to work out that they're an awful person. And that is great over the whole thing, but you're still reading just an odious human being for three-quarters of a book, which is just a long time to spend with a prick. And I have that trouble sometimes, even though I do enjoy a villain narrator. So I don't know where I land on it.
It's a very difficult balance. What else have you been absorbing into your brain?
Okay, so this one has been my train commute read, which is Labyrinths by Jorge Luis Borges. This is the my literature side, a collection of short stories where it's every one of them has like a world with a slight odd twist or a slight like variant, and a lot of it is, I would say, weirdly a parody of academic writing, which is such a like hyper specific weird little area and it's one's like a linguistic study on a civilization that don't have nouns and just the problems that arise from all of that. And like small imaginings of this, the library that actually goes on forever and how annoying it is to use. Like it's fascinating and mind bendy and plays with time and your emotions and language in a way that I would not recommend for a ride to work. I got like and I'd be like in a rabbit hole and I'd be wandering out and you have to like your colleagues will ask you some impertinent question like how was your weekend? And it's just really hard to dig your way out of that hole really quickly to be like, ah, fine, I didn't do anything.
Well, of course, labyrinths we spoke about in the infinite libraries or libraries in the plot
Ah.
subgenre deep dive, which was a few weeks ago. Of course, labyrinths includes the very famous short story that is just inhabiting David Bowie's tight leather pants. You can't get out. It follows you around the room.
But it really makes you question the idea of what genitals are and what do they mean for each of us.
Truly, the Mona Lisa of groin lumps. It's smiling at you. I've been reading Mushroom Blues. You said you like noir.
Mhm.
Mushroom Blues is a really classic noir. Maybe too classic noir if you've been over noired, but it's set in a world in which there are two civilizations. There's humans, and then there are mushroom people, and of course, you have a whole lot of like class and race things going on, and the hard-bitten cop having to work with a mushroom person to solve a murder. It's great. It's great. Mushroom Blues. Highly recommend it. A lot of fun.
Can I ask, with what, seriousness, like, is a mushroom person is this world treated really hard-nosed, or is it are, like, other mushroom people as real as you and me, or is it kind of absurd that there are mushroom people about?
No, no, it's they're as real as you and me. It's quite dark, it's quite gritty, it's sort of,
Interesting.
yeah, it's sort of like it's a dystopian it's really fun. It's not without its flaws, but I very much enjoyed it. which brings me to Trope on a Rope, discussing a particular trope and the books or movies that have that trope in them, whether you enjoy it every time you come across it or whether it's something that grates on your nerves. James, have you got one?
Mine has to be this is a trend in books, in television right now, particularly television, I would say, which is starting with the action scene, your in medias res, and then cutting to 9 months earlier. Like you know what I'm talking about. Like I would say the Blade itself does this in a certain way. It does that like kind of a bit on the nose. Chapter 1. The end. And that's just it grates me every time I hear it. And I would say like at least for they're not like the story actually goes on from there. But these ones that show like, here's 30 seconds of action. Bet you want to see more of that and where it goes. Well, unfortunately, we have to show you how we got to the truck crash. Now, this is how that character got their driver's license and whatever. It just feels like such a cheap trick. And I got this bit of screenwriting advice recently that I really like, which is that the problem with flashbacks, when you're doing flashbacks in general, is often that flashbacks are very expositional. They are telling you things about a character because you can't find another way to tell them. So you're like, why does that character always cringe when he sees a peanut butter sandwich? Well, here's a flashback to the day a bully kicked his ass for one or whatever. And you're like, well, you could have found another way to show me that. Like, it's just a bit of plot that you can't actually fit in, that you're like trying to trick me into. You're getting me out of the story so you can add detail that you weren't clever enough to fit in another way.
Yeah, I think my problem with it, particularly in that, like, someone gets stabbed in the heart and they're in the first scene and you're like, "Let me tell you how you're gonna care about what happens to this character."
Mm.
And so then it sort of is this weird Chekhov's death hanging over the thing, and they just make you like them enough, and you almost inevitably they don't die in that scene when it comes up. So then it's like, "And then I tricked you," and it's like, you if you just played the scene onwards, we would know they didn't die, but you have to kind of create this false tension by traveling back in time to make you care about the character who they are then gonna fake you out on the death of.
Exactly. It feels like such a producer's note that, like, you assume your audience has no patience, and so you won't build a story. You will show them, "Hey, there's gonna be a story coming. You're gonna love it." And it's so weird now when you, like, watch a film and it takes time to build. Like, you know, if you watched The Godfather now, if you made The Godfather now, Sonny would get shot to pieces in the first scene, and then it would cut back to him at the
That's
wedding being like,
me.
"This is the best day of my life." Yeah.
It starts with like, record scratch. That's me with the bullet holes in the chest.
You're probably wondering how my boy got massacred.
My pet peeve trope this week, and it's a frustrating one, but I only realized it in seeing it done well, was
Mhm.
people not wearing hats in the desert. Specifically on screen, they're in the desert. They're all like they're on a desert trip. They're traveling through the desert for weeks,
Mhm.
and none of them is wearing any sun protection. You're in a world that doesn't have sun cream. You just I mean, A, I feel sorry for the actors. B, I feel sorry for, the characters, and the only way I kind of realized that this was a trope that frustrated me was, watching Rosemary Pike in the most recent season of, Wheel of Time in the desert. She's just wearing a sun hat, and it's like, yeah, of course she is. She's a very pale lady. She's just I mean, either I don't know whether like, I would love to know whether that was because the costumes on that show are incredible. I wonder if that
Mm.
was the costumers just making that decision for themselves, or if she, as clearly the heaviest hitter of that cast, was just like, "No, I'm wearing a hat. My I'm gonna protect this moneymaker."
When you think about the background of any kind of creation of a television show, you know there was a hat meeting. There was and like not one hat meeting. There were like 4 hat meetings where someone suggested a hat, some like a PA was sent out to buy various options of different hats. They came in and they had a hat fitting where they chose the hat. Like these things are take so much effort as well is always a joy to me. But you're right, it makes so much sense. And like there's a similar like Australian one where everyone wears I was trying to think, I've got one, you can actually see one hanging right over my shoulder there, the Akubra. the big felter cobra. Now, look, Australians do own that occasionally, but if you are going out in a very hot place in the middle of the sun, you aren't wearing a big felt hat, like a big hat made of thick materials. We have other hats. We have hats that keep the sun off. But if you want to look like a bushranger in any film set in an Australian outback, you got to be wearing that hat all the time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Bob Catter has one stapled to his head.
But it's like honestly, and this is like a bit of behind the curtain for international listeners. Australians own akubras, so when we go to the country, people from the country know that we're not actually from there, and they can tell us where the good coffee is.
Like, yeah, a pair of R.M. Williams and a Kubra hat without a scuff on it, and people know exactly where to point you for an $8 cappuccino. Um, if you have any tropes on a rope that you would like to send to us, send them to us at realmsunknown@thebuglepodcast.com. Also, if you have any things that you want to recommend to us, things that we should be putting into our brain holes, that is the email address, realmsunknown@thebuglepodcast.com.
Can I drop into a trope that I love that's hack? Like, it sucks. It's
Yes,
bad
please.
writing every time, but I love reading it, which is the new character introduced near a quite reflective surface all of a sudden. Like, as like, oh, through this pond or through this newly polished shield, I can finally see all my features, which I'll now describe for you and
Yeah.
assess myself.
That is a classic, classic, classic romance trope, particularly if you want to read my book, A Passion for Passion. We have a whole section on how you know that you're a romance heroine, and it's often are you sitting in front of a mirror enumerating the things that you think are your flaws, which to the reader feel like not at all flaws. You remember how your brothers used to tease you about your large, limpid, violet-colored eyes? And you're like, "Come on." Yeah, I'm a big fan of that trope. And that brings me to this week's subgenre deep dive, our subgenre submarines, where we go into a little narrow cranny of speculative fiction. This week it is plant life, or as I call it, flora core. The use of interesting plants and plants being used in an interesting way in science fiction or fantasy. Obviously, you start this with the classics. You've got Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham.
Ooh.
You like Day of the Triffids?
It's one of my favorite sci-fi books of all time. It's such a fun premise. I love John Wyndham. It's also one that is better in my mind. That every time I reread it, I'm like, yeah, it's good, but my memory of it is fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. I think my memory of Day of the Triffids is that people are very quick to like walk out the window when things go slightly wrong. They're just like, well, better take myself out. It's like not a lot of resilience in the in the world. Like they're moving very slowly. Also, plants, very plot relevant plant life in H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds. Classically comedy, fantasy, you have Audrey 2 in Little Shop of Horrors.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned before in the ad section Yggdrasil, but there's also, not just in mythology, the tree ship Yggdrasil in Hyperion and other tree
Mm-hmm.
ships in subsequent books in that series. I'm gonna recall my own sort of teen years and mention with love the bioship Moya in Farscape. Did you ever watch Farscape?
Of course, one of the most amazing things to ever get made. Like that, looking back on this, you're like, how did this happen? This is
Extraordinary.
remarkable.
It was a co-pro between Australian production house and an American production house. Jim Henson was part of the team,
Mm-hmm.
so the puppetry on it is incredible. There's one sort of fairly main character who's just a puppet the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just amazing. Not good, but amazing.
Also, one of those series that, because it was just so exposed in Australia, I presumed was one of the biggest series ever. That,
Yeah.
like, a reference in the, like, I've had a similar one with Animorphs, of all things, where I'm like, I always thought Animorphs would be really cultural currency that you could reference Animorphs and someone's going to pick it up. Apparently, no one fell down those particular wormholes with me. But, the Zergholes. But, the Yurt holes? What the hell were those things called? But anyway, Farscape, great.
Farscape, great. If we're going to go legit classic, Octavia Butler's Plant-Like Aliens in Amnesty from Bloodchild and Other Stories. The question of what sentient plants might want from us is interesting. And
Mm.
then, of course, Mushroom Zombies, The Last of Us,
Mm-hmm.
which is, the game that's on the tip of everyone's fingers and the show that is on the tip of everyone's lips at the moment. I want to go a little bit more obscure, a book that I have already mentioned on this podcast, The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is a murder mystery in a fantasy bureaucratic empire world where altered plants are used for everything, including buildings. So everyone's just sort of making these sort of magical plant life. Has a really fun sort of neurodivergent genius detective who has to stay in one room and her assistant who has to go out into the world. It's a really fun. And then because Tom Neenan isn't here, I'm going to put a recommendation directly from Blue Sky. Mitch Ben over on Blue Sky has recommended a Doctor Who episode, which is Seeds of Doom. And he says it's from maybe the best series ever of the original run, season 13, 1976. It anticipates John Carpenter's The Thing by sticking closer to the source material, John W. Campbell's novella Who Goes There, than the movie it was ostensibly a remake of 1951's The Thing from Another World. In this case, it's a couple of frozen alien seed pods dug up by unwary polar scientists. And when one of them thaws out and infects one of the team, he begins to mutate into a man-tree hybrid, which, given this is a kids' show in 76, looks painful. Things really kick off when the other pod falls into the hands of an evil billionaire botanist, Tony Beckley in camp Bond villain mode, who falls under its influence and starts conspiring with it to thwart any attempts to contain it, even as it starts cyclically manipulating all native plant life to attack humans. It swells up to the size of a mountain and prepares to eject spores all over the earth. Mitch says it's genuinely one of the best classic Who stories ever, one of the few six-parters not to feel padded and sluggish, and the scary parts are genuinely scary, including a great instance of Chekhov's industrial compost mulcher. Which is to say, if you're on Blue Sky and want to drop us a recommendation, we're Realms Unknown over there, and we will take all of your advice each week when I announce the subgenre submarine early, and you can drop in your recommendations. I think this stretches out a little bit more, not just from sentient plants, but we can go out to like sentient forests, particularly like the Darkwood, which appears in a lot of fantasy, from J.R.R.
Mm-hmm.
Tolkien to Blue Moon Rising by Simon R. Green does it very well. Botanica has been recommended to me. I don't know a lot about games, but I've got recommendations from good people. Botanica is a hand-drawn 2D side-scrolling platform adventure game in a world of sentient plants. You can learn and borrow abilities from the enemies and bosses and defeat the scourge that threatens all of plant life. Strange Horticulture is also a game in which it's like a puzzle game where players run a plant shop and interact with a coven and explore the mysteries of the plant world. And then Caves of Cud, which is a science fantasy rogue adventure where players interact with a vast ecosystem of sentient plants within a retro-futuristic world. So if you want to get your little green thumbs onto your game-playing devices, those are the games that we recommend.
I can recommend a game. This is rare for me, but this is one I actually played a lot. It's an Australian game too, and it is beautiful and it's so much fun. And it's from the Switch, and it's called Hollow Knight. And a lot of this, you are going under. You're a little rabbit with a sword. You're going through underground worlds, and you're running about all there. And I would say for like a and you fight a lot of bugs, which is good. I don't care for bugs. I really am up for fighting them in any game. I would say, like, for a gaming novice for me, and talking to friends of mine who are not gaming novices, it's got that great curve where, like, I can work out what to do and I'll be all right at it. And someone who is incredibly good will find it very challenging and interesting and beautiful. And just like I think this game is about 7 years old now, so there may have been developments. There might be a number two. I am not across that part of the world, but it's so dark and fun, and the exploring of a dark little forest by a little rabbit, which is everything I want.
I mean, that I now I want that. Now I wish I was good enough at gaming to not feel really sad that I'm letting down the avatar when it dies. Which brings us to our section, The Minds of which is where we talk about something that we loved, but now in retrospect might be a little bit and say whether we would still recommend it with the caveats. James Colley, have you been thinking about anything that you used to love?
Why does Kurt Vonnegut hate women so much?
He's so beautiful and so kind to every kind of human being, unless they happen to be a woman or fat or dare they be both. Oh, he's so mean in those cases. And, and it's made worse by the amount of beautiful humanity elsewhere in all of the book. It's like, why can't you also ascribe that same niceness to these people who are humans as well? That so like it's I feel like this is a real like going when I like this is my comfort read. It's what I read so much as a teenager. It's still my favorite author. It's something I come back to, but then there are major themes that you're like it's like I would say I feel when I'm reading it less like, oh, it's a shame that you left in this or you describe something in this way. I get closer to that feeling when you realize your dad's a person and that person could use some work. It's closer to that for me, being like, "Ah, God, I'm obliged to still love you. Don't love every bit of you anymore."
That makes me think, sort of slightly tangential of, that actor, who's he, who played Tootsie?
Oh, Dustin Hoffman.
Dustin Hoffman. He went viral about 10 years ago now with an interview where he was talking about how he had been put into drag for Tootsie, and it had been this massive process of getting him into drag, and then he'd said, "Oh, good, now make me a beautiful woman." And they said, "This is as good as it gets." And he had this sudden, like, lifting of the curtain, and he's like, I just realized how many beautiful like, how many women I'd been ignoring because they weren't beautiful, and how many
Mm.
women I just sort of looked past as potential friends because they weren't attractive." And he got, like, a lot of credit and kudos for that. And I was like, "What? What?" Like, it took realizing that you were not a hot lady for you to think of unhot ladies as human beings. Like, this is not a thing to be boasting about or to be held on the shoulders of, like, I was yeah, it was depressing that that was seen as, like, so worthy of applause. That said, I'm also wary of, dehumanizing the very successful and wealthy and powerful, 'cause I think it's too easy.
I feel like it's something that like always jars me and just makes me feel, unwelcome in a genre is that the fatness is evil of the fantasy world. Like um and I get it. It's like in the same way that misogyny is shorthand for a bad person, they gotta use this as like, well, this is a time of scarcity, so if you're fat, you must be greedy or whatever. But I think that's just a lack of complexity in your world that you can't understand that maybe people in this fantasy world have all the same variants and interesting different blah blah blahs as the people do now. Wouldn't it be great to have a world that had all of that thing? Wouldn't that make you a good and interesting writer? But then it just feels like far too often it is like by the way his stomach hung out under his shirt, you could tell that he was a bad moral person.
Yeah, Jabba the Hutt on Ozempic cleans up his act and becomes a upstanding moral citizen. Yeah, it's not particularly useful as far as those things go. So, can you recommend Kurt Vonnegut even with the
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think you should absolutely read it, and then you should you should feel that. I like sitting in things of people I don't agree with or I hate a certain aspect of their stuff or whatever. I feel that's good and useful provided it doesn't cause you horrible pain and distress. But also I think that the overwhelming good makes up for the bad in this. Like this is not a 50-50 game. It is an 80-20, and the 80 makes the 20 more disappointing, but it's the 80 is still the 80. Enjoy the 80.
Yes, I know that a lot of people are picking up Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan because of the Amazon series, and I have to say they are going to get an eyeful of the fact that Robert Jordan loves a shirtless scene. Oh yes, just enjoy. Oh, how do they initiate a new member to this tribe? They get their shirts off, they get their tits out. Yeah, he's just a boob man, but it's like a lot of a boob man, and you have to think, he wrote like 100 million books over the course of 58 years. You know,
Mm.
it's this sprawling epic, and it started before before you could just lingeringly describe the shirtless ladies, as part of your It's called fantasy. So I think there's gonna be a lot of people who are gonna have to be walking through the minds of, on that one. that brings us to the end of this show. 3 things to recommend to you. Why not seek out James's recommendation of The Blade itself from Joe Abercrombie's First Law trilogy, which we have recommended before in the Grimdark episode, or enter the Fungloverse with Mushroom Blues by Adrian M. Gibson from our Plant Life Flora Core deep dive. If you like not good but amazing, check out Farscape, which Jim Henson worked on, and I just think you should watch it for that reason alone. James and I both loved it. Don't tell us if it's bad, please. It's a core memory there. Or if you want to support another Australian production, try playing the Australian game Hollow Knight on the Nintendo Switch. If you fancy being a bunny rabbit fighting bugs, exploring a fallen kingdom plagued by a supernatural disease. Way too many others to mention here, so check out the show notes for every one of the books, movies, TV shows, and games mentioned on the show with links to buy books in our affiliate bookshop store. Of course, we cannot list all of the things, so please let us know either on Blue Sky or over at Realms Unknown at thebuglepodcast.com if you have any further recommendations for us. James, have you got anything to plug?
Yeah, if you like dystopian horrors, I'm covering the Australian federal election for The Guardian. You can check that out on The Guardian's website or on my own Instagram feed. Gruen Nation will be back soon on the ABC for Australian viewers. And also a couple more shows I'm working on get announced soon. One that I can say has come out that will be fun for viewers is the Australian remake of the series Ghosts, the very beloved series Ghosts. The cast has just been announced, and that will be out in a little while. They're filming it now, and it's going to be a corker, so check it out.
That sounds delightful. I cannot wait to not have time to watch that. And you can also buy James's book. It's called The Next Big Thing if you are a book lover, which I know you are if you probably listen to this podcast. And also my book, A Passion for Passion, which is available everywhere. It will be in Australian bookshops at the end of May and in American bookshops in the first week of May. So first week of May if you're in America, last week of May if you are in Australia. As I mentioned, I cancelled the New York leg of my tour. I'm not going over to America. You may have read any newspaper in the last week. And that was fun. You can find me online at patreon.com/Alice Fraser, and you can join my writers' meetings there. I now do 4 writers' meetings a week, so you can almost certainly find one that suits your timetable. We have general writers' meetings, we have a comedy-specific writers' meeting, and we have an admin and industry writers' meeting. So if you go over to patreon.com/Alice Fraser, you can join the crew. They're very nice people, just lovely people working on all of their different exciting things. This is a Bugle podcast and Alice Fraser production. Your editor is Ped Hunter. Your executive producer is Chris Skinner. I'll talk to you again next week. I'm Groot.